Welcome, everybody, to the 10th and soon to be award winning program in our monthly workshop series on the ForeFlight EFB. We offer tonight's program for your consideration as we enter the 2024 awards season. I don't know if you watched the Grammys last night, but I think we got a little bit of a snub there. We probably should have gotten one for Best Recorded Pilot Program, but oh well, maybe next year. We'll try even harder. My name is Mike Jesh. I'm a flight instructor based in Southern California by day, and by night, I fly big jets for work across big wide oceans. But this is where the real fun is, here with the little stuff. So before we get started, just a quick little things. If you're based in Southern California, you may know that we got a lot of weather here, and I am under it. I got a little bug of some sort over the weekend here, so my voice is not up to its normal sultry quality. So I beg your pardon and forgiveness on that, and we'll work through it, get to the other side of this thing. Tonight's subject is going to be IFR flight planning. And if you are a VFR only pilot, or maybe if you're an IFR pilot and you don't fly IFR very much, you're still going to get a lot out of tonight's program. So please stick around. There's a lot going on here, and I'm sure you'll get some more questions answered along the way. So joining me tonight, as always, is my good friend and fellow airline captain, Brian Schiff. Come on in, Brian. Welcome
Hey,
aboard.
thanks, Mike. Did I unmute myself?
Uh,
I know that's a funny thing with,
yeah,
I don't know how many Zoom meetings I attend where it's like, hey, you're muted, you're muted.
yeah. You'd think I'd figured that out by now. It's my first
No,
rodeo. What can I say?
it's all part of the experience.
Yep.
Absolutely. No, hey, thanks for the intro. Thanks for all that. We've also got with us tonight Chairman Emeritus of the National Association of Flight Instructors and a good friend of mine who's been teaching with me for a long time now, Bob Mader. And let's see if I can get us all on here. Hey, Bob.
Hey, how you doing, Brian?
Good, good, good. And James McKay will be helping us in the background. He's the one here who really knows how to use ForeFlight. He's an admin on the ForeFlight users group on Facebook and does a lot of help for us on this. He's out giving an award right now to somebody very much deserving of it, and he'll be back and joining us and answering questions shortly. Mike had mentioned that we will have a new format we're working on, and that's going to be pretty exciting. We may have a beta. Watch your emails, and if you're interested in participating in that, please send us an email and say I'd like to watch. It'll be an extra section where we'll host a beta, webinar with our new format, and we'll try it out and see. And you can give us your feedback on that, which I do appreciate. All the wonderful feedback. It's a lot of great positive compliments, but I hardly ever read those. I always go read the critics, and there's no shortage of you as well. I really appreciate that. You've told us that you want to get more to the topic right away, and that we kind of drag on too long, and I couldn't agree more. If I were watching this, I would think the same exact thing. So I agree with that. We're going to do the Q&A at the end, and only questions that apply to this topic. We are going to set up a special web page, which I'll show you a link to shortly, that has all like pre-made videos of the Q&A, so you can go watch that on your own. It'll also be cataloged and sorted, so you can kind of search for the question you might have and go look at specific videos on that. That way you only watch what you want. You're not held captive here. Going to try to stick to a hard 90-minute timeline as well, so we'll try to stick with that. So if you guys don't have anything else, have you guys done any flight planning with ForeFlight IFR? You guys do IFR, don't you?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I have.
Yeah.
Quite a bit lately. We've had a ton of IFR weather out here lately. It's been really fun flying around in it.
Yeah.
If I'm flying my own airplane and it's not a flight lesson, well, I can't do lessons in my own airplane for insurance. But if I'm not doing a VFR flight lesson, if I'm flying myself in my personal plane, I'm always, even in VMC, I'm
Yeah.
filing an IFR flight plan.
A lot of times it's easier that way. We're for airspace, around LA, big busy areas, Chicago, even St. Louis or here in Dallas. It's easier because you don't have to worry about the airspace. You just have to do what you're told. But you need to be instrument rated. If you're not instrument rated and you're a VFR pilot, you're going to get a lot out of tonight as well, because I actually teach a lot of the IFR techniques we're going to show tonight to private pilot students or just VFR pilots as well, because why not benefit from the additional safety afforded by the procedures that keep you away from terrain and airspace, so to speak. So you do have to be careful. So you need to know the nuances and the differences, but a lot of what we're going to go over, you'll be able to use too if you're just a VFR pilot. So without further ado, I'll jump into this. You guys have anything else before we dive in? All
I
right.
had
Just
a whole bunch of
No.
stuff, but my brain is so addled I don't remember.
no.
I'm sure
the
it was
beauty.
really
Let's-
important though.
I know,
Let's have
that's,
at it.
that's the beauty. We get to meet new friends every year, it seems. I'm going to go ahead and let's see, put my screen and camera on here. The welcome. So tonight we're going to talk about IFR flight planning using ForeFlight. Like I said, again, you VFR pilots are going to get a lot out of that as well. So we have a lot of giveaways. I'll just list them briefly here. We got two. Actually, the Finer Points is giving us one year access to their ground school app. We got an ASA backpack, 2 lifetimes to Gold Seal, a 1-year membership to NAFI, an ultimate pilot logbook, and a pair of Flying Eyes sunglasses. My favorite flight instructor did autographed one of his books, and we'll be giving that away. And also a pivot case, another pivot case iPad cover and case, and a suction mount for your iPad. But we'll talk about more about those later. Just hang out toward the end. We'll give those away. Again, our disclaimer, we're not associated with ForeFlight. We don't receive anything from ForeFlight, and we're just doing this. We're just a bunch of experienced people with a lot of time using this app, giving back to industry and talking about this. You still need to make sure that you follow regulations. Even if we give you bad advice, we will deny ever having done so. No, seriously though, we're going to try not to do that, but make sure that you take responsibility for your own actions as far as that's the disclaimer goes. Again, the last pitch here, I hate to even do this, but we got the Zoom account renewing itself, and we may get away from Zoom, but we'll have to pay for some streaming stuff and all that. We are offering this totally for free. I do not want to give back to industry and charge for it, but it costs us a lot of money. If I could cover that and cover my costs and break even, that's all I want to do. And if you feel like giving, please go to our website. Feel free to donate. We really appreciate that. But last year we went way over. I don't know, I say way over, but it's all relative. We gave any extra money, anything above and beyond the cost of producing this, to some scholarships. I know one of them was the 99s, who's been great in supporting us. I know we've got a lot of you 99s on here, and I really appreciate you guys showing up as well, and everything that you guys are doing. I'm seeing some exciting things. And the scholarships that you give to lady pilots, we've definitely given a contribution there. So anything that you guys give to us, that's where it's going. It's covering their costs here, and then the rest is going to scholarship funds. I know AOPA has one that we gave to the foundation as well. So you learn, you earn, and you return. And we're all at the phase of life where we're returning. And I consider myself a GA pilot at heart, and then I do this side job like Mike to help fund our general aviation hobbies. Speaking of money, ForeFlight costs money, and some of you may not be able to afford or have the highest tier plan, the Performance Plus plan. If you join NAFI, along with all the other things that NAFI offers, you can get a significant discount on that, and that's all we're saying here. But you may see some features that we show where you don't have it, and that's because it may be in a higher tier plan. And you can go to the plan comparison page in the ForeFlight manual, and you can see what your plan has, and maybe the feature that we're showing you doesn't exist. So in your plan, at least. So that's why you may not see something that we're showing you. As far as the iOS update, 17.3 is good with ForeFlight if you're using Garmin Pilot, WingX, Flight Plan Ghosts, or FlyQ or Stratus Insight. Hang on, don't update to iOS 17.3 yet. But if you're using ForeFlight, and I assume you are because you're here, 17.3 is good. So again, I had mentioned the Q&A. We're going to have a special dedicated web page with videos to answer the questions that we would have normally had here, taking up all the time that many of you did not like. And quite frankly, I agree with you. I think it just took too long to get to topic, kind of like I am now. But look for that button on the website. If I were to show you the website, you'd see that it looks like, if I can find it here, this. And it's that button, question and answer right here. When you tap on that, we're going to have a whole population here of question and answer videos on the website. So look for that in the near future. And also, if you have tips, tricks, suggestions, you can email them to us. We'll put them on there as well. And this email address is on our website. So tonight we'll look at what's new in ForeFlight, just a couple things, and we'll jump right into IFR Flight Planning. We'll do our giveaways. I'm going to stick to a hard 90 minutes. So at 8:30 Central Time, we're going to cut it off. we'll hang out a little bit longer and chat with you guys and do some informal answering of questions or whatever you want after that. So tonight we're going to do this route. If you want to load it into your iPad ahead of time, it's from Boeing Field in Seattle to Spokane. We'll figure out the route and the altitude as we go here. Let's get to what's new. First of all, the latest change is 16.1 came out this month. And the funny thing is I have to check these like the morning of the workshop. Like this morning, I look and say, oh, look, there's an update. I can't plan very far in advance for teaching a ForeFlight workshop because you know how often these changes come, but it's every month. And so now we've got added waypoint coordinates copying and updated reserve fuel. It's fuel policy, updated reserve fuel information. And we'll take a quick look at that. The waypoint coordinate copying is kind of cool. You tap on a place in your iPad and you can see the coordinates up here on the top of what pops up on the window on the right. And then you can tap on copy. In fact, if I just show you, let's see, if I go to my iPad and I just will tap on the map and just tap and hold everything in that little area. And I have airports selected. You can select all right here. But either way, you see the location that I've just tapped and held right there. Well, if you tap on more, you can now hit copy and you'll get a confusing list of choices. Which one do you want? I suggest this second one. It's the most accurate and it's degrees, minutes, minutes, decimals. That one will work in Google Earth. So you can take that point, copy it into Google Earth or Google Maps or whatever. You can copy this one. And it just copied it to the clipboard. And then you could actually, if you were typing an email and wanted to send that or wherever you want to put that point, you would just put it in the window here. And, well, there should be a paste, but you could now paste it. It's on the clipboard, so you could paste that at that point. What's new in ForeFlight reserve policy is there's a lot new in here, and I don't want to go over this. We could spend a whole section on this, but it basically changed the way that reserve fuel is calculated based on where you are, and it has a reserve fuel policy tool. So you would need to set up and look for the one that you want. You'd look at reserve fuel, where you are, and check on the policy. Basically what you're going to want a contingency fuel. I'm sorry, I'm not going to read all. I don't want to read into how it's all calculated, but you can go in the manual and see this, or we may go over this in more detail later. But basically for ICAO, which is what we use, it adds the following quantity to your reserve planning: 45 minutes of reserve fuel at 1,500 feet above the destination or alternate airport, and 30 minutes for turboprop or turbojet. So that's the default. It's just telling you what that is. If you select ICAO, and it gives you some notes on how it plans the fuel. So there's a little bit more detail in the way that it plans reserve fuel. All right.
Hey, Brian.
Yeah.
I should just note one quick thing here. I've seen a lot of questions online about this and about setting the fuel policy. And unfortunately, at this time, it looks like full tanks is not one of the options. So
yeah.
That would certainly be an option that I would like. So my suggestion would be, if you think you'd like it too, ForeFlight watches their email address at team@foreflight.com and suggest that as an option.
Yeah, I agree. We're getting out to a lot of you watching this, and I think what Mike's saying is, I want to leave with full tanks. Let's do my full planning like I'm leaving with full tanks, and that would be a nice feature. And so, yeah, we encourage you to write ForeFlight, team@foreflight.com. I think that was a good idea. And mention that, because that's really the most useful fuel planning that we're going to have. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, actually, to be honest with you, after I have a little bit more time to study it. So,
and I'm already seeing messages about that in the chat here. So
yeah, it could be a good
with 2,000 emails tonight.
Oh, geez. Well, so anyway, we'll come back to that. We will talk about it some more. But for what we're talking about tonight, IFR, you need to have fuel to get to your destination. You need to get to your alternate if one is required. And I always like to file an alternate. And then another 45 minutes beyond that. Well, 45 minutes where? Cruise at your best, most efficient speed. Yeah, it's at cruise speed. But we'll talk about that a little bit more later. The presentation. So this is the route. If you want to enter this in your route page, it'll automatically fill in a lot of data for you. I'm going to show you that in a second. But we're going to go between Seattle Boeing Field and Spokane. And let's see. If you want to have a lot of resources I'm going to refer to tonight, we're going to talk a little bit more about IFR departures than the rest of IFR. Now, if I was doing a true IFR lesson, and we're going to do a lot more of this later, we could spend the whole day. But so I'll be focusing on that, but I'm not going to get too far into the weeds. But I have created a page with a bunch of resources for what I'm talking about tonight. And if you want to dive into the weeds a little bit deeper, go to that website. I have a lot of documents on there, including Gold Seal has been nice enough to donate their know-it-all IFR cheat sheet. I created a flight planning checklist, and it's funny, we use checklists for before landing, before takeoff, starting check. We use checklists for flying the airplane, but our biggest problems areas for flight planning is in flight planning. The decision making in the flight planning seems to take a sidestep or a side seat. Why not have a checklist for that? Planning an IFR flight involves a lot of things to check, and our aircraft owner's manual is not going to have a checklist for that. So I thought, well, wouldn't it be nice to have a checklist of all the things we need to look at before flight? And so I've put that also on this resources page. There's a hint of the first page there. Also, I really suggest looking at the Instrument Procedures Handbook if you haven't looked at that. There's also some FAA documentation we'll be referring to, but all of that should be in ForeFlight. So the only thing here that's not in ForeFlight are these two cheat sheets, from the one from Gold Seal and then the checklist that I made, which are on this website here, the resources. And if you want to scan that and have it handy, then you can. All right, let's go to the iPad and start planning a flight. So you'll notice I preloaded some things in here. I put an airplane 128 Uniform Whiskey, which is something that can get up to 39,000 feet and fly Mach 7.8. Obviously, that's not my general aviation world. I want to fly general aviation, but also I talked to some people who fly a fleet of airplanes and they accidentally file the wrong end number. Well, when you're flight planning right here, you can type in, so we're going to go from KBFI space, keyboard again, and then to KGEG, Spokane, and I'm going to type space. And now watch what happens. I'm going to put my N number in here, 31 Alpha Juliet, and I know that's all you club members who are local here will recognize that one. As soon as I hit enter, I want you to watch what happens right here. These three tabs on the left side of the flight plan filings. I'm going to hit enter right now. Boom. It auto-populated the N number. It auto-populated my default profile and my default altitude that I fly that airplane. Obviously, for this flight, 6,000 feet isn't going to work, but I know that, let's say I know I want to do 11,000 feet. So I can type that right here also, 11,000. ForeFlight knows that a number that looks like that is an altitude. So watch what happens right here in the altitude advisor as soon as I hit enter. Boom. Now, you'll notice something different also. If I were to have 4,000 feet there, for example, and then I went over here to the route advisor and tap on suggested routes, you'll notice that you're going to see some altitudes here, 4,000 feet. Well, those are the routes that it's suggesting, but it's putting 4,000 feet in there because that's what's in the altitude advisor right here. You may have noticed there's a problem with that. Now, I recommend going with the recommended route if you're really flying IFR. If you're a VFR pilot, certainly you can use these routes because these are going to clear the terrain by 2,000 feet over mountainous area or all obstacles. So this is very handy for even VFR pilots. I suggest taking the recommended route. When I do that and select that route, it's going to say, hey, you had 4,000 feet. Do you want to update your planned altitude to 11,000? Yes, I do. Okay, and there it puts that route in there. But before we do that, what I actually wanted to do, and this is a great route if you're going to go VFR, it's another way to do it. You need to be careful that you're not going through any class Bravo or Charlie, because IFR assumes that you're going to be talking to air traffic control. If you're actually flying VFR, then obviously you need to check on your airspace, but the terrain clearance is going to be pretty good. Before we get into this route, I just want to save, I saved as a favorite a different route, this one. And the reason I did this, now we're not VFR, we're IFR. So I'm going to change my chart to IFR low to, let's see, where are we? IFR low right here. And so this is the one we're going to be working off of. And if we zoom in over here, we have a departure and it shows us, okay, this route goes from Boeing Field, Seattle, directly to the Tagore intersection. Well, flying IFR, you follow procedures that are supposed to keep you clear of obstacles because you're theoretically in the clouds. You can be in the clouds. I was going to make a joke about Mike's head being in the clouds, but I decided not to do that. So anyway, you're going to be in the clouds. You want to make sure that you're not going to hit anything.
Now.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry. So anyway, what you want to do is how we're going to get from the airport runway to our MEA. That's something we're going to talk about in a little bit more detail. But for now, I just want to look at this route. And if we come along here, you'll see Victor 120. I see an MEA of 12,000 feet. That's the lowest that we can be on that airway. And we're going eastbound, which means east is odd. We need to be at 13,000 feet. Now, why is there a big difference between 12,000 and 13,000? I don't carry oxygen bottles and I don't want to use it. Above 13,000, or I should say above 12.5 for after 30 minutes, I have to use oxygen. I don't have it available in the scenario today, so we can't do that. Now, you could file to be above 11.4. You could file for 12,000 eastbound, and they might give it to you. But I wouldn't chance that because it's possible that there's either a later MEA that's higher or that they might ask you, hey, we need you to climb, and now you're unable, and that could cause some problems. So this route just, to me, is not acceptable if I don't want to use oxygen, or maybe my aircraft can't get that high. So I wanted to do this at 11,000 feet. So let's go back to the route that we chose for the suggested route from ATC. Recommended. And by the way, when ForeFlight recommends a route like this, their success rate in cleared as filed is up over, I think like a couple of years ago, it was in the high 70s. In other words, like 70, I think it's closer to 80 now. 80% of all flights who take the recommended routing for IFR get cleared as filed. And it may even be higher than that now. I know that they're working on some very good accuracy on that because they're using a lot of data obtained from clearances that have been given. So taking the recommended route is usually going to get you a cleared as filed. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in there. And again, I'm going to use the zoom to route button right here to go back and look at my entire route. And there it is. You can see we're going south of something. We're going to do this at 11,000 feet. Another thing you can do in here is we're going to leave at 16:30 Zulu. So this will be tomorrow morning. Notice right here, I have a time in here, and that might be because I saved it. Let's try 17:30 Z. 11:30 a.m. It did change it. That's Zulu time. Well, this did work. It put 9:30 a.m. because I put Z in there. So we've got that set in there. I'm going to change this time back to tomorrow at 8:30 because that's what I want to get the briefing for. Tuesday, February 6, 8:30 a.m. And that's going to be local time of wherever this departure is. Even though I'm in the central time zone, it knows that this departure is from Seattle, so it's going to use Pacific time. So I'll close that. We got the route that we want in there. Now, so how are we going to get from Seattle to the first fix? Sometimes they'll tell us, sometimes they don't, but that is the very important thing that a lot of IFR pilots don't think about, and it's something very important to think about because you can see that after VAMPs, we have an 8,400 foot MEA. So on that route, we need to be at 8,400 feet. We could go to Seattle VOR and then fly outbound, but there's a crossing altitude here at Seattle, and that's what this X with the flag is right there. I'm going to close that. So that means there's a crossing. We need to cross that VOR at a certain altitude. And we're going on Victor 2 eastbound out of Seattle. So Victor 2 eastbound, we need to cross it at 4,300 feet. Arguably, if we took off and flew to the Seattle VOR, and I don't see the nav there, so I hit nav, and then I hit Seattle. If we did that distance, I can click on that leg and get the information about that leg. It's 7 miles. Can I get to that altitude in 7 miles? Are they going to let me do that? Maybe not, because SeaTac is a very busy airport. I can't see them letting me do that in Milo 182. So that's probably not what's going to happen. We'll take a look at what is going to happen. Another thing I wanted to look at here when you do this, a very cool thing for VFR or IFR flying is to look at the hazard advisor once you've planned your route. And so we can go up here, check on the hazard advisor, and it defaults to our cruising altitude. Looks like I have 11.5 in there because I think I clicked on that. No, it's 11. This is at 11,500 feet. I can take it down to, looks like it's set for VFR altitudes. Let's see, I think I have IFR easterly, 11,000. There we go. Now it's showing 11,000. And so there's right here, guess what that is? A little mountain that might get in our way, but we're not going that far south. But so now what you can do is you can drop this down and just look at the route. As you drop it down, you can see the terrain and the way you're going to fly. If you look at this terrain, you can kind of see why the MEAs are higher in this part of the flight. When we were going along here, we were going right over these mountains. That's why the MEA was a little bit higher. And as you can see here, at one point at 3,700 feet, it's not going to work. You can see it shows obstacles that are much higher than we are. But if we drag this up, we should clear all obstacles by 2,000 feet in mountainous areas. So we're at 11. If I go to 9, which is 2,000 feet below us, I shouldn't see anything in this corridor. And let me turn the map off so you can see it. That corridor around my route, there shouldn't be anything above 9,000 feet in there. Well, your corridor might look different, but for IFR, they're guaranteeing you 2,000 feet above the highest obstacle within an 8-mile corridor. So 4 miles to either side, which is what the width of an airway is or was. Now everything, you can't really tell exactly where the edges of the airways are because everything is Class Echo airspace. But in any event, right now, you want to make sure that your corridor is set. So if we go to settings, which I'm looking for, profile, and then go to settings, and we'll look at the corridor width. It's only 2 miles. The corridor needs to be 8 miles wide for IFR. That's 4 miles to either side. And you can see how it jumped up a little bit thicker. And this is just kind of proving what we already know, what IFR has already told us. You will not have any obstacles penetrating 9,000 feet in that corridor. And you're going to be at 11,000 feet. If I'm a VFR pilot, I really like that planning aspect. And as you can see, if we drag this down, you can see where the terrain is. Obviously, on this route of flight, the trouble spot is this first part of the flight where we've got to climb out. So how are we going to climb out? So when I give proficiency checks, I ask pilots, how are you going to get from the runway to the minimum en route altitude or a crossing altitude, or how do you know you're going to clear everything? And there are procedures in place to do just that, and they are standard instrument departures. We have departure procedures, and they can be graphical, which is a SID, or an obstacle departure that has a graphical, or it could just be a departure procedure. And a lot of airports have these. Even airports without terrain, there might be a building or a tower, and basically what the way it's designed, and if I go to, I'm going to get back out of here, let's see if I can show you my screen again. And I'm going to pull up that's the checklist that I have a shift notes loss of comm checklist. I'm going to show you that in a little bit. But if we look at the IFR, that's not it. Give me a second. Nope, that's not it. That's what you need to have to get your instrument rating. That's all on my website too. I'll show you that later. I thought I had it open. The IFR procedures guide. Well, anyway, it shows you the profile. It's all in there for how it's designed. The airspace and the procedures are designed. So the first thing I'm going to do here to show you this, it's easier to just show you than to talk about it and keep babbling. But I'm going to go to procedures. And we want to do a departure from Boeing Field. And here are the departure procedures. And these are SIDs. Now, light aircraft pilots, we may not be able to comply with a lot of these. We might be able to. Also, we may not get cleared this because ATC may not be wanting little airplanes doing it. But you can see, if we click on one of these, for the Seabane 1, it'll show it to you here. There it is, and that's a Jeppesen chart. Here's the Kent 8, and you can see where it takes you. We can look at the chart, the procedure. This takes you to radar vectors to your fix. Climb 137 heading and follow the localizer southeast across this intersection above 2000 or ATC assigned altitude and radar vectors to assigned route and fix. Most likely that's what you're going to get is radar vectors out of this airport. Some airports may not have radar capability. They may not be in radar till you get higher. And we'll have to take a look at that as well. So
Hey, Brian?
Yes.
I don't mean to interrupt, but also, for airports that don't have a SID like that, a departure procedure, make sure you're looking at the obstacle departure procedures in the AFD.
Well, that's where I'm going.
I'll shut up. Okay.
That's okay.
Not in the AFD, but in the procedures.
Yeah.
All
So
right.
a lot of people, it is in the digital procedures guide, but you saw the SIDs there. Those are procedures there. A lot of people just file like GA, I fly. A lot of times I'll just say no SIDs, no stars. But what are the obstacle departure procedures that Bob's referring to? And what those are, if we go to the airport tab, and by the way, we go to the airport tab, these are my favorites, but I can also go to what's on the map in the flights page. If I tap on that tab, well, there's my flight right there. And so I got Boeing Field to Spokane. I'm going to tap on Boeing Field and I'm going to go to procedure. And if we go to departure here, notice we have more procedures. And the first one we're going to look at is takeoff obstacle notes. There's several pages of, there's 3 pages of them. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to read all this and then we're going to plot every one of these things here. I'm kidding. That's page 1. If we close that and look at page 2 of it, there's more. And we close that and we look at page 3, there's even more. Well, what are these? These are the obstacles that you need to see and avoid, because when you first take off, you need to get to a point 35 feet above the end of the runway. Then you need to get to a point 400 feet higher than that, higher than above the runway. And so when you get from 35 feet to 400 feet above the departure end of the runway, they have plotted out that profile, and it's a 40-to-1 profile. And they basically drew a line. In any airport that has an instrument approach, they've done this evaluation for departure. If you don't see an instrument departure or an obstacle procedure like this, the odds are you can take off and climb straight out to 400 feet as long as you meet the minimum climb gradient. And it's based on the minimum standard climb gradient. Most IFR pilots don't know what that is either, but it is 200 feet per nautical mile, which is the 40-to-1 ratio. All of that documentation you can see on the resources page, and you can see how that's created. I put a bunch of articles in there. I don't want to do a deep dive into that. What's important to know now is that there is a minimum climb profile you need to do. If you climb at 60 knots, then you're doing whatever your rate of climb is equals your feet per nautical mile. So this is based on 200 feet per nautical mile. So if you have no obstacle departure procedure at all, they've surveyed it, and this is an airport with an approach, that means that if you climb at 200 feet per nautical mile, you will clear all the obstacles once you get past a mile from the airport. So all of these, where'd they go? All of these are the obstacles that are closer than a mile. If they were to use all of these to program in the departure procedure, those all kind of bust that, and they'd have to make a very steep requirement. So they don't. And that's why for IFR departures, you need to have 1 mile visibility. All of these are within 1 mile. Yes, IFR pilots can take off 0-0, but if you look at the minimums for a standard takeoff, it's 1 mile visibility. This is why, because you need to see these obstacles that they're listing here. Once you get past that 1 mile, as long as you climb at 200 feet per nautical mile, which at 60 knots is 200 feet per minute, most airplanes can do that. At 120 knots would be 400 feet per minute. So if you climb in between there, you need to do between 200 and 400 feet per minute. And I'm going to show you where the chart is if you don't want to memorize that. So odds are you can do the 200 feet per minute, 200 feet per nautical mile in your airplane. So we go to the obstacle departure procedure, and we go departure, and I'm looking for it here. Takeoff. It's under takeoff minimums. And this is something that a lot of pilots don't look at, but when you see the A lot of people refer to this as the terrible T. That means there's terrain or obstacle, there's something. So there's takeoff minimums that apply to this airport. So let's go to Seattle Boeing Field and let's take a look at this. Takeoff minimums and obstacle departure procedures. So this is saying that if we're going to take off on 1-4 left and right, and those are the runways in use, then we need to have 500 and 2 3/4 with a minimum climb of 270 feet per nautical mile to 700 feet, or standard, and that's the 1 mile visibility with a climb of 700 feet per nautical mile, 708 feet per nautical mile. So what this is saying is, if you can't do this climb gradient of 708 feet per nautical mile, then if you can do, I'm just gonna make this bigger, you can do 270 feet per nautical mile, as long as the visibility is at least a ceiling of 500 feet and 2 3/4 visibility, miles visibility, then you only need to make this climb gradient. And what is that climb gradient? If so, you don't have to remember math. I don't like to remember math. There's a document, and this document is also on the references page that I created, but you need to know how to find it in ForeFlight. So what is my climb gradient versus feet per minute? So just go to the Documents tab, and it turns out I'm right there, but I want to show you how to get to it. Go to the bottom and drives. There's 4 drives here. You see the FAA drive, tap on that, and then go to the Digital Procedures Supplemental. Very important document, and there's a lot of good information in there. So I want to show you that. We tap on that, and there's page 1, and there's a table of contents. There's a lot of good information in here, and as I scroll through here, you're going to see, this is kind of like the, are you reading all that? So there's a lot of the legend, there's a lot of good information. What you're looking for is on the last page right here, and it's the rate of climb or descent for the feet per nautical mile that they're giving you. So again, if you're doing 200 feet per nautical, if they're asking 200 feet per nautical mile, which is the standard, and you climb at 60 knots, well, then you only need to do 200 feet a minute. If you climb at 90 knots, then you need to do 300 feet per minute. So let's say my climb speed is 75 knots is VY. I'm in a 172. It's going to be somewhere between 200 and 300 feet a minute. I'm flying that down at sea level myself and one other passenger. I know that this 182 can do it, so I know I can maintain that. If it called for 708 feet per minute for nautical mile, well, that's a little bit different. This chart stops at 550. But if you're climbing at 60 knots, 708 feet per nautical mile equates to 700 feet per minute. Climbing a little bit faster than that, I'm going to need to do a higher, more than 700 or 800 feet per minute. So I'm probably not going to be able to do that. It's very important to know, okay, what is the climb gradient required to clear all obstacles? And so if we go back to our airports, looking at the procedure, let's go back to the takeoff minimums chart. Looking at the procedure, these are the minimums we just discussed. Now the procedure for 1-4 left, we're going to make a climbing right turn, and then we're going to climb direct to the Seattle Vortac and continue climb in the Seattle Vortac holding pattern, hold east, left turns on the 290-degree radial inbound, cross the VOR above 3,000 feet, and then proceed on course. So what that's saying we need to do is we need to go to the Seattle VOR, and if I put the aeronautical in here, you can see the runways. That is a left turn. When do we make that turn? 400 feet. So we go straight out to 400, we turn left to the VOR, and we hold there until we get to 3,000 feet, and then we can depart on Victor 2 eastbound from the VOR. Looking at the chart. Now, this is all theoretical stuff, and this is everything that happens if you're not talking to ATC. It's what you're expected to do if you lose your communications, because there has to be a plan of what to do. If you get on there, you try to call departure control, and you get nothing. You get nobody. So that's the plan. Some airports have even further, and this one does too, of diverse vector area. That's something that ATC has access to. And they know that on between these radials, as long as you're above this altitude, they have minimum vectoring altitudes. We know what they are, but they need to get you up to that minimum vectoring altitude. So they have a vector area that they know they can give you a climb that as long as they give you you can maintain 200 feet per nautical mile, you can follow those vectors and get up to altitude there. I don't want to dwell too much on this. It's just important enough that I want you to know it. But while we're talking about building a holding pattern here at the Seattle VOR, now in real life, we know they're not going to let us hold at Seattle. They're going to give us vectors until we're at a safe altitude. But if you lost your comm in Seattle, you're squawking 7,600 now because you lost your comm and you're going to fly this route. You know there's VFR off to the west and you can't make it back in. You don't fly an instrument approach. You're going to have to fly them in this holding pattern to 3,000 feet and then leave the, let's see, IFR low. And you're going to have to leave on Victor 2, departing the VOR at 3,000 feet. Well, how do we build that holding pattern? I heard Sue ask that. So that's pretty easy. We could tap on Seattle Vortex here, or we could tap on it here. I'm going to tap on it here so you can see it. Tap on Seattle, and we're going to tap on hold. Notice it says to published. I tap on that, and I think that because they told us about that holding pattern, it's probably published. So I'm going to tap on setup as published. Now I could set up right here. I could use all of this and make up my own holding pattern and build the one that they described in that departure procedure. Or let's just take a look and see if it's in this setup as published button. 290 left turns, 1 minute inbound. I think that's the one that they told us about. I'll go ahead and load that. I'll tap on it and add that to my route, and there's the holding pattern. Now, was that in fact the 290? Let's just make sure. Let's go back to airports. Let's look at takeoff minimums because that's where the departure procedure was. And sure enough, climb the Seattle Vortex and holding pattern, hold east, left turns on the 290 radial, and we'll cross it above 3,000. So if we go back to our map, we are holding east. The inbound leg is east. It's on the 290. And so what we're going to do when we hit the VOR is we cross the VOR, we're inside the pattern, take a hint, stay inside the pattern, do a teardrop. Back inbound again, and then we do our left turns, we're climbing, and once we get to 3,000 feet, what if we get to 3,000 feet right here on the inbound leg? I would not advise making a right turn toward the non-holding side or unprotected airspace. You know, can you make that right turn to the airway? I don't know. I would tend to hit the VOR, make this turn, continue the turn, and intercept the airway back outbound. Because here we do have a little bit of an issue. We're supposed to follow Victor 2 eastbound, but we're holding on the 290. But what makes the most sense? Where are you protected? Over the holding pattern for sure. And so I would keep turning in the holding pattern, re-intercept that airway 3,000 feet eastbound. You're in no man's land while you're doing that intercept. So if you wanted to, you could turn back, go direct the VOR, and then depart eastbound. That way you know you're covered. But you better climb at a rate at least 200 feet per nautical mile so as to get to the minimum en route altitude here. Right here is, let's see, 3,100 feet. If you're using GPS, it's 5,300 feet. It's 8,400 feet eastbound. So we're going to have to keep climbing at least 200 feet per nautical mile. But bear in mind, if you're going to climb at less than 500 feet per minute, that's a mandatory report to ATC. So if you're going to be less than 500 feet a minute, you need to be sure and tell ATC. This is going to get them keeping an eye on you as you're climbing toward that terrain, which is not a bad idea. You'll notice here that we have these black lines, one on each side of the fix here, a VAMPS intersection. And that tells me right away there's an MEA change at that on the airway after that point. So while we've got, let me close this, 8,400 feet eastbound, because we're headed toward the mountains, as we know. 4,000 feet westbound, because we're heading away from the mountains. It's 5,300 feet if you're using GPS, so that will clear the terrain flying on a GPS, but it won't necessarily guarantee you radio reception with ATC. Of course, none of these will, but you don't need to receive the VORs that define this airway. To receive those, you need to be at 8,400 feet. Continuing on here, there's an airway MEA change because of this stop line here. And if we get over to here, you can see that the MEA is, well, still 8,400 this way. It changed westbound and the GPS changed. And the GPS routes are these blue ones. 35 miles from the VOR is Bander intersection. Again, we have another MEA change. As we get over to here, the MEA now becomes, and this is going to get really fun, it's 8,000 feet. So we may be past the peaks. It's 8,400 feet on this leg right here. Then after this intersection, it's 8,000 feet. This looks fun right here. I just want to share this with you. Study that for a minute. First of all, unless you're flying GPS routes, if you are, you can file those. And that's like this Tango 268. You'll notice comes to a fix right here and not to the VOR. It goes to a MRF intersection. This Victor 2 comes into the VOR, which is Ellensburg VOR. Now, if you have VOR and GPS, I can hear someone asking right now, can I use my GPS to identify the airway? Yes, and that's in the AIM, using GPS in lieu of a nav aid. That's a section in the AIM, so yes, you can. But to receive the radios, you'll need to be at the MEA, or if you're down at the minimum obstruction clearance altitude, the MOCA, then you will only receive the VORs you'll within 22 miles. You'll clear terrain, but you'll only receive the nav aids within 22 nautical miles of that fix. One thing I want to show you here, though, this is the government chart. Generally speaking, I like the government en route chart better than the Jeppesen digital one, but this right here makes a great case for the Jeppesen charts. If we take a look at that right here, and I know all of you may not have that, but if you have it and you go to Jeppesen IFR low, here's the same area. Looks a little bit different. So you can see Victor 2, and the data you get is based on your zoom level. You can see there's a published holding pattern there. You can see that Tango 268, that's a GPS route, comes to the MRF intersection and outbound. But when we look at the scan, which is basically a PDF scan image of the paper chart of the government low altitude en route chart, and you blow it up to that level, it's a nightmare. There's a lot there, a lot going on. Also, notice there's an X on that VOR. What is a flag with an X on it? I call it a cross because that reminds me it's a crossing altitude. Well, it's kind of hard to find. That means we need to cross that VOR. There's an MEA change, and we need to cross that VOR one of the two directions at a certain altitude. And that's an MCA, minimum crossing altitude. You can see right here, if you're on Victor 25, well, we're not. Victor 187, we're not. But if you were 25 northbound, you'd have to cross that VOR at 6,800 feet. If you're on Victor 187 westbound, you'd need to cross that at 6,700 feet. So normally you would cross that VOR. I mean, you're going to get cleared to 11,000, and hopefully everything works well. You're at 11,000. But you might not have gotten 11,000 yet. You have to follow these IFR procedures. Well, what procedures are you supposed to follow? Well, IFR is all about what are we going to do if we can't talk to ATC anymore. And so I want to go to this real quick. And I have just on my website, I have this kind of a summary of loss of communications. I kind of took, instead of Cliff's notes, it's Schiff's notes. And, I know I'll get a lot of feedback for that. But here's kind of just a summary of what you're going to have to do. And the altitude is you're going to fly the highest of the following for each segment. You have to find the highest altitude of these three: the last assigned, the MEA for that route segment, or the altitude ATC said may be expected. So what does that mean, may be expected? Well, when you got your IFR clearance, they probably said something like climb and maintain 5,000 feet, expect 11,000 or 1,000 feet 10 minutes after departure. So if you lost your comm, that clears you 10 minutes after departure to climb on up to 1,000 feet. And so you climb to that altitude, and that's where it would be. But for every leg, you need to assess what's the highest of these three altitudes. And that's just something else that I like to teach on that. So back to the iPad. The crossing altitude is kind of hard to see. That doesn't apply to us eastbound on Victor 2. But you can see as we go along here, I'd also like to show you Gold Seal Ground School has a great video on this topic. And I think I had it in no, I don't. Let me see if I really want to show it to you because it's fantastic for showing you what this means with the MEAs and what those hard stops look like.
A lot of the features we're talking about are using the Performance Plus, the top level subscription. So some of these features may not be available if you have the Basic Plus or the Pro Plus level subscription. Also, Brian's got the Jeppesen chart subscription, as do I. So some of the features may look different or not be available if you don't have the JEP charts available. So we're not trying to advocate for one or the other. It's just what we happen to have. And unfortunately, in ForeFlight, there's no way for us to turn it off and make it look like this is a Pro Plus subscription. So we're kind of stuck with it. We apologize for that. We've noted it before, but we know it's a source of confusion. So sorry about that. We're stuck with what we get.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mike. And I also appreciate that that we have some features you may not have. You may decide that you want it, and if you fly in this area with this, you might consider Jeppesen, but that's just something to think about as you're planning your flights and you look at, okay, I mean, these just don't look that good. And if I go to the Jeppesen for my region, you can just see it looks a little, there's VFR, IFR low looks like this. And that's because I have the font turned up big, and I have intersections. But you can just choose what you're displaying on here by going to the settings and looking on this Jeppesen section right here. And I can turn waypoints off and clean that up a little bit. I can turn airports off. I like to leave airports on because I like to know where those are. Airways are kind of smart to have in Navigate, so that's kind of why I leave that. But again, those are customizable, where the government charts haven't quite gotten to the point where they have digital customizable low altitude charts. For IFR, I might prefer that. So also what I'd like to show you is that if you're looking at a Jeppesen, let's go back to the airports real quick. And I was showing you the takeoff minimums and showing you how you had to look at it here. It shows you the feet per nautical mile. And then we go to the digital chart supplement to look up that climb rate and see what that equates to. And again, I'm not trying to sell Jeppesen. I'm not affiliated with them. I want your job to be easier when you're flying IFR. But if you were to look at Jeppesen takeoff obstacle notes, and we would look at, it's actually on the departure on the runway airport procedures, where it is the back of the airport diagram. You go to that, and guess what? Here's the obstacle departure, and it tells you right there it's a climbing right turn, then direct the VOR. There's the same thing we saw, but it's right here in the Jeppesen chart on the back of the airport diagram. Also, there's another thing you'll see called visual climb over airport. You can't quite meet that gradient. You don't want to fly a SID, but you want to fly IFR, well, you still can. Get a request for a visual climb over the airport, and ATC has to approve this, but there's a procedure in there, and you would need to file in the remarks section of your flight plan, file that if you plan on flying the obstacle departure or visual climb over airport, I highly encourage you to put that in the remarks section of your flight plan so ATC knows you plan on doing that. They may not let you at a busy airport like that. At a small uncongested airport, you probably could, but you need to put this in the remarks section. If you're going to fly a published route, a route with a name like a SID, then we would go to procedures and then departure. And if I put a SID in here, for example, then this one has a name, and it's the Kent 8 departure. And it shows you right up here how you'd file that when you fill in the flight plan. So Kent 8 to Zyged, and then vectors on course. So you could file that, but you need to make sure that you can meet the climb gradient. Read all the notes on here, and you can see right here on the SID, runway 14 right, here's your climb gradient to do this SID. And you may or may not be able to do that if you have 600-foot ceiling and 3 miles visibility. Now, this is to keep you away from all those obstacles that were published on the previous page, which is why I showed you those. Those are your responsibility. So if you're one of those VFR pilots that says, hey, I'm part 91, I can take off 00. Well, more power to you, but you might want to go and plot all of these so that you know where they are, or at least be very familiar with your area. There could be a tower near the airport, a crane, there could be a silo of some kind. Who knows? Anything, something is protruding in that mile radius around the airport, and that's what these are. So you need to be familiar with that. Another thing that I will do, and this is a ForeFlight trick, is that if I go to documents, and let's say I'm going to need this for my flight, let's say I just take a screenshot of this, and I want to put that in the flights as a document in this flight. I'm going to take a screenshot of that, and I'm going to go back to the, let's see, the airports and look at the takeoff minimums, and I'm going to take a screenshot of this. I just want to have that handy. I'm going to take these 2 screenshots. Let's see, I'll get down to what matters here. And I take a screenshot, and just for example, it doesn't matter now. So these, you'll see it's also taking 2 screenshots, one of the screen where I'm sharing, so that's why you see that. But now you can go to flights. Where's flights? And then you can select this flight, which is right here. I've already sent it to flights. But if you didn't, then let's just go through that real quick. I don't want to take for granted. So if you're happy with all this, just send to flights like that. And it's sending it to flights. And now I've got it, it's going by departure time here. So here's the one that I think this is the one I just sent. So you can hit files right here. You can get the navlog. This is where we're going to get the briefing. But right here's what I was going to was files. Tap on that. And I'm going to add some files to this flight. Those 2 pictures I just took, I want to have those. So I'm going to go to photos, and I would go to photo library, and you can select your photo, the one you just took the screenshot of, and hit add, and it's going to go right there, and then hit done. Now you've got that file saved in your files for this flight. And you can do that with anything. You can add any file to this flight and keep it all kind of centrally located. I think that's just kind of a neat trick. Checklists or airport information or whatever. Going back to the flight information, once we're happy with all this, there's a lot of questions about going through a briefing. What do I do for, what's the order? There's a lot of weather information out there. There used to be an area forecast. Remember, it was the paragraph that was really long, and every word was abbreviated, but you learned how to abbreviate from northern Washington to eastern Idaho, area of low pressure. And it went through that whole thing, and that was called the area forecast. And that went away a long time ago. What we have now is, and I'll go ahead and go to a Chrome window, and I'm going to go to aviationweather.gov/GFA. And this is aviationweather.gov, but it's the graphical forecast for aviation. This is a fantastic tool. It can give you a great graphical forecast over whatever time frame you want. So we can go to whichever products we want. We can go to weather products. We can go to TAF map. I like to look at what do we care about most, the clouds and the visibility. Ceiling and visibilities are kind of important to me. And that's why I don't see it right there. Products, ceiling and visibility. What am I missing? Is it on weather? Well, here's ceiling and visibility right there under weather. Imagine that. So now if I select that, it's showing me where the weather is going to be. Well, where's my route on here? And I can take this time slider and slide this. Well, I'm leaving at 16Z. So let's move this over here to 16Z. That's what it's going to be like then. And you can slide this back and forth and take a look at what it's going to be like at whatever time you want. What's leading up to that. You can also hit play and watch it change. Well, where's my route on here? That's kind of a good thing to know. If you're flying an airplane, hit airplane. If you're flying a helicopter, tap on the helicopter. It's going to show you more pertinent information and altitudes for each. So let's tap on airplane, and we can go to, if I can remember where it is, there's a place in here where you can put your route, and you can search for a certain airport and go there. I think it's this button right here. Forgive me, I'm looking at my iPad. Yeah, so you can put your route in here. And let's just put our 2 points. We could put our full route in there if we want to. But I'm just going to put KBFI to KGEG. I just want to see this overall picture where these are. Click Draw Path. Now you can see it's drawn in purple there, that purple line. This looks like a definite IFR day. And I would certainly be concerned with freezing levels at this point if I'm truly flying an IFR airplane. Normally this page will have, it has legends at the bottom, so you can see what, get back to that. I never know what to do when I accidentally hit that. This is, let me just hit enter. Yeah. Normally there's a legend, and it's right here. Tap on legend. And so now what do these colors mean? What's happening here in this ceiling of visibility? The flight category, purple is low IFR. orange is IFR, blue marginal IFR. Well, it looks like right along here where those mountains are, it's going to be low IFR. Are the ceilings lower or is the terrain higher? Well, one of the two, and so on. So there's the legend. There's more. If there's a SIGMET, and there is, it looks like this big purple area. It's ceiling and visibility is IFR. That's a AirMet for ceilings and visibilities and IFR conditions. That's in this purple area. So that might pertain to us. Our destination here is not in that SIGMET area. It's in marginal VFR. So that might be better for our arrival. I also would look at the TAF there. Now, of course, we can get that in ForeFlight. We're going to get that in the briefing. So I don't want to spend any extra time on this wonderful website. I want to go back to the ForeFlight briefing. And so while I'm here, I'm happy with this route. Make sure that before you do the briefing, go through and make sure everything on here is as it should be. If you're going to do an instrument departure procedure or a visual climb over the airport, you would put that in the remarks section of the flight plan. Anyway, I'm just going to take for granted that everything in here is accurate. And I'm going to go ahead. I see my iPad flashing. And I'm just going ahead. I could file it right now, or I could go ahead and hit briefing. I noticed, I want to make sure that I'm going to unplug this and plug it back in. Sorry about that. Technology. It'll be back in a second. There we go. The flight plan, I want to make sure it's IFR. Sometimes it shows up as VFR on here, but when I did the planning tool, it did IFR, so it should be in here. I think that's going to be when I proceed to file. That's where I'm going to see that. So for now, let's just go ahead and get the briefing. I'll tap on that. It's retrieving the briefing. You want to make sure, again, like we talked about last month, that you have the right format selected, HTML versus PDF. To see it in this format, you need HTML. That's like a website where you step through all of these sections. Synopsis, current weather, and then forecasts and NOTAMs. That's the order it's going to go through. And so if we go back up here to the beginning, you can use this button down here to step through. So you can see METARs. It doesn't look like it. There they are. We step forward to METARs, and that's what we got. These are the METARs for that area. We can look at, when we scroll down, we can actually read them. Another thing that you can do is you can go to plain text and select that on. And then when you go down here, these are in plain text. I've been reading the old style for so long that I'm good with that. Anyway, that's one thing that I wanted to show you on that. We can step through the whole briefing, but I don't want to take the time to do it. There's pilot reports, cloud coverage, surface visibility, the TAFs, everything goes in the order that you need. It shows you your route, but on terminal area forecast, if you scroll down, it shows us your passing time, the departure time. When we cross over this Payne Airport, when we go by it at 16:30, it's pretty close to departure. But as you go down here, it shows you your passing time and the conditions of that airport. Obviously, IFR, marginal VFR. Good thing we're doing IFR flight planning. Again, your passing time, the conditions forecast at that time. We're planning this the day before, as all good pilots should do. So you can update this later before you go to bed. You can go back to your briefing, and you can hit like in the briefing, and then hit refresh down here. And if there's anything that's changed, we'll go through and update it. It should also update. You can set notifications to let you know that there's a new briefing, that something has changed. And of course, you check it again before departure, obviously. But that's the briefing. Same as VFR. We can go ahead and proceed to file that flight plan. And again, it is IFR, general aviation flight. And this is where we want to make sure everything's right, because this is what we're filing. The call sign, the true airspeed, number of aircraft. It's a flight of 1. Oh, we got 2 people on board, so that's not correct. So I'm going to go ahead and change that to 2, not 12, 2. And that is correct. And here's the en route route, altitude 11,000, time en route, fuel on board, all that. Alternate, I always have an alternate. How do you know if you need an alternate? Well, it's that 1, 2, 3 rule. I don't want to go over that either, but there are weather requirements that if your destination, and I'll say it, is below 2,000 foot ceiling or 3 miles visibility within 1 hour of your ETA, then you need to have an alternate. I like to always have an alternate.
Before you move on, Brian,
yeah,
just scroll down just a tiny little bit.
Down?
The other down.
The other down?
Move it up, yeah. In that remarks/other information, a couple of people have asked, where do you put your remarks in there about no SIDS, no stars for whatever reason you'd want to do that, or that you plan on doing the VCOA? There's that additional remarks box.
Yeah, that's where I was
put-
getting to, but did I pass it already?
I think you just went past it just a moment ago.
Okay, here's the
Down just
top.
a little more.
There's the top. Departure, en route, remarks right here.
Yep.
Other information. So you can put additional remarks right here. No, my space bar is not working on here. SIDS, stars, request, VCOA. I want the visual climb over the airport. So you can put that in there. ATC will see that. You'll get it or you won't. Student pilot, etc. Anyway, when you're all done with all that and everything's correct, you can tap on file. I'm not going to file that now, but once I file it, you'll get a notifications that your flight plan went through. You'll get ahead of time, you will get a notification about your expected clearance, expected route, and so on and so forth, which is really kind of cool. Any other questions before I kind of change gears?
No, I think you're doing pretty well so far.
So we're looking at,
We're just past an hour now, just so you know.
okay, good. So we're looking at departing, I said 8:30 a.m., but now we're delayed to 4:30 p.m. We're going to make this 4:30 p.m. tomorrow, and I'm going to close that. And I don't know how many people accidentally hit now instead of close, but it feels like to me the close should be up here on the right side or a different
I've never
color.
done that.
What's that?
I've never done that.
Yeah, exactly.
Neither have I, not once ever.
Only every day.
Exactly. All right. So if I select tomorrow at 4:30 p.m., I'm gonna hit close, and now it's at 4:30 p.m. I can look again at, now I'll send that to flights again, and it'll update it and highlight it, and we'll look at that. When am I arriving there? Is that going to be before or after dark? Well, if we look at the time en route here is 1 hour 45 minutes, so we're going to land at about 4:30, 5:30, 6. What's an hour and 45 after that? 6:15 p.m. What time is sunset?
That sounds about
I'm not
right.
night current. What time is sunset? And when do I have to be night current to
couple
carry
hours ago.
passengers? Well, if we go to the airports tab, and again, we're on maps and flights, so it's going to have the flights that are in our flight plan. And I tap on Spokane. What time is sunset there? It's going to be right here. Sunset at 4:58 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Also, you can see here that both airports are on Pacific Standard Time. And that's one way you can see that. So yeah, we're going to get there at 6 something. It's going to be dark when we arrive. So I'm going to need to, at some point, go do 3 takeoffs and landings so that I can carry passengers at night. But I need to do those at night. So night currency could be a thing. Just keep an eye on that. Dark, how good are you? How comfortable are you with flying IFR in the soup over the mountains at night? Well, that's something you're going to have to ask yourself and decide, okay, I don't know, that's not something I'm comfortable. I know I'm not in a single engine airplane. There was a day when I would have done that, but they say experience paints a yellow stripe down your back, and they're not kidding on that. All right, so if we go back to here, one thing that's really cool too that you need to be aware of when we get to our destination, we need to plan it. Well, what have we got here? From gangs direct to the airport. That's not going to work. We can't do that, right? We're not on any kind of route there. So how are we going to get, we need to connect our en route to the airport, to the runway somehow. So let's take a look at procedures that they have for that. If I tap on the procedures tab and I want to look at arrival into, actually I don't want to do an arrival, I want to do an approach. So let's look at the approaches into there. Right now it's showing me what the best wind is. And let's just assume that the winds are going to stay the same for our time of arrival. And I don't want to do, let's go back down here to government charts. Let's see, we got more of them here. So ILS to runway 3, that looks good. It's the best one. Do I want a localizer or an ILS? I would say the ILS. So I tap on that. Okay, do you want Jeppesen or the FAA? Let's do the FAA because not all of you have Jeppesen. So I'm going to click on that and it shows it to me here. So where on my route can I connect to an initial approach fix? There's a hint. There's a fix right there, right after Zoomer. So I want to file to that initial approach fix. And that initial approach fix has a transition over here to the localizer, it looks like. So I want to do this ILS with this YCUB initial approach fix, and I'm going to tap on that, and I'm going to add that to my route. And it did it. Oh, but there's a problem. It also shows it on the chart there, so you can see the chart on the map, but I'm not going to actually go to gangs now. We're going to get off of this Victor 2 at YCUB and fly this transition to the approach. So how do you get rid of gangs? Well, let's look at the flight plan, and we look at this, and gangs is part of our arrival on this. Well, I got a Zoomer 2 arrival into there. So apparently when I saved this, I did save it with an arrival, and it's this Zoomer 2 arrival. I don't know if you have that or not. When you selected the route, that might have been on the route that was suggested, but this gangs intersection is on it. What I'm wanting to show you is that how do you delete that? Now, yes, you can tap on it and you can hit remove from route. That's one way, but that's not the fun way. I wanted to show you something that a lot of people don't know about, and that is you can tap on this arrival right here. It's the Zoomer 2 arrival with the Moses Lake transition. So tap on that and then hit expand. This is a cool trick. When you hit on expand, it now shows all the fixes up here in your flight edit box. And now you can see gangs is right here. Now you can tap on it and you can hit remove from route. You can tap on it here and hit remove from route. A lot of ways to skin the cat. You can also just do my favorite part, because it's rewarding to me to watch this, is you can tap and hold it, grab it, pull it off the chart. Watch what happens when I let go. Poof, it's gone. So now it connects right after Zoomer. It goes to YCUB, and then that fix on the approach using this approach transition. So now we've gotten rid of that extra fix. Just another little ForeFlightism. You can also do the same thing with the approach. You can see that the approach has a fix on here called, close that, called Carlet right here. You'll notice that if you add that to your route, you have these minimum altitudes on here. It throws them in there on your flight plan. And if we look at our flight plan nav log, you'll see that JEGDU is 4,400 feet. It's not on here, but you can see it right here, 4,400 feet. And that is, if we look down at the bottom and look at the profile view of this instrument approach plate, the minimum altitude is 4,400 feet approaching that. And then at caret, it's 3,900. And lo and behold, caret, it's at 3,900. That bar above and below means at 3,900. Over here, we have a bar below. That means above 4,400. And if we look down again at the profile, we have a line below it, meaning we have to be above 4,400 out here. And this is while you're doing a procedure turn or approaching on the transition from YCUB to JEGDU is above 4,400, and then from JEGDU to caret, we look down at the profile and it says 3,900. So once you are on course on the final approach, you go down to 3,900 to caret. And what I like to think in my head is, okay, I'm this altitude until fix, and then what altitude next? So I say in my head, I'm doing 3,900 till caret, then the next altitude, which is 3,420. So I say in my head 3,900 till caret, then 3,420. That's my next altitude. I hit caret, it's 3,420 till zonum, then the MDA. And in this case, it's a decision altitude. That's if we're flying, I apologize, if we're doing a step down approach on the localizer. This, of course, is an ILS. So you're going to go down to 3,900 feet and intercept the ILS at 3,900 feet. And that is your final approach fix, which should coincide with the caret intersection, which should be 4.4 DME out on the localizer, which also is, I don't see a radial on that. In any case, just know that you can add that to your approach like that. What do we have to do to go below our decision altitude, which here, this straight in for ILS 3, all categories, A, B, C, and D, it's 200 foot above the ground is 2,585 feet and 1,800 feet visibility, the RVR. So the minimums, we can only go down to 2,585 feet, which is 200 feet above the airport, above the touchdown zone, and we need 1,800 feet. So to go below minimums, we need to be in a position to make, there's a whole list of things we need, right? We have to see a bunch of certain things. But the important thing here is you need to be able to determine that you have this visibility. It's 200 and a half. If they're not reporting RVR, and I guess they aren't, then you need to have a half a mile visibility. How are you going to know if you can see, and it's only up to you, the pilot, if you can see 1,800 feet or a half a mile? That's what the approach lights are for. And they have the symbology that they have for a reason. And you can see here that this is the symbol showing you what kind of approach lights are there and the image for it. And I think that's ALSF2 right there, which, okay, what does that look like? This is something you need to plan ahead of time and look at. ForeFlight makes that pretty easy. What's that going to look like to me when I get there? And then you need to understand, where is it on these approach lights? What represents 1,800 feet? So you need to kind of figure that out as well. But what you can do is we can go to the airport tab. Here's Spokane. Let's look at the 3D view. And again, this is a feature you may not have, and I apologize, but I want you to know it exists. We want to put ourselves on final for runway 3. And there we are. It's actually showing traffic. You can pinch and zoom and look at it. This is what it looks like. But I'm also going to tap on nighttime by hitting this right here. And look at that. There's the approach lights. That's what those approach lights look like. How far apart are they? Look, there's an airplane that's actually showing traffic right now. Looks like they're landing the other. Oh, I don't know what they're doing. But you can see that's what the approach lights look like. It's medium. It's a ALSF2. Let's see. How do we know what those are? Well, I believe that's in the digital. Was it in this book? Correct me if I'm wrong, you guys. Where you see the approach lights. I know it's in the AIM. Crickets.
It's in
there
the
we go.
terminal procedures supplement.
Yeah, so it's
Everything's in this document. I always tell people, if you're an IFR pilot, this is a document you really need to have installed on your iPad.
Yeah.
There's so much really important, valuable information in there.
Agreed. Especially if you don't have JEPs, because JEPs will show you this. But they have and you can look at this symbol. That's ALSF1. And the symbol we saw was, what did we see there? I already forgot.
ALSF2.
Was it 2 things? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go back to documents. We're in the terminal procedure supplemental, and we look at the ALSF2. That's what it looks like. And it shows you the distance here. So from this bar here, these are red, these red side row bars, this is 1,000 feet. And then the PAPI we know is another 1,000 feet down the runway. That's 2,000 feet. If you're over the end of the approach lights, and the moral of the story is the approach lights are they're 2,400 feet long. The reason you see both of these is most of the time with a 3-degree glide slope, it's going to be 2,400 feet long. But if you have a shallower glide slope, like 2.4 degrees, that's what this is made for. And there aren't very many of those. This needs to go a lot further out because you're going to be 200 feet a lot further out than you are if it has a 3-degree slope. So so they make it 3,000 feet. You're going to have 2,400 feet, virtually half a mile. So if you break out and you see the entire approach light system, you can see half a mile. It's important to know and be familiar with what you're going to see, what you're going to expect, and to know what the approach lights look like and what distances they represent, so that you can assess that you have the proper visibility to descend below the decision altitude. All of that these are all in the resources guide. This document itself, if you prefer to have the PDF, is also on the let's see, on my website, but it's on this. Let's see, let's go to the browser. Where'd it go? Here it is. On this resource page, it's the FAA terminal procedures. That's a search button. Let's see, where is it? Digital terminal procedures supplemental right here. You tap on that, you'll have it. ForeFlight has everything that's here except for these top two and this search right here. This is a really cool feature. If you want to do some planning on your computer, you can hit FAA Terminal Procedures, search, and I just recently discovered this, but if we wanted to enter our airport, let's say we're going into Spokane, we enter that and hit go. Well, everything that exists for that airport shows up here. Our takeoff minimums chart, the diverse vector area. So if we just want vectors out of there, we can tap on that. What can they do for us? Well, guess what? It's in the takeoff minimums chart document that contains our takeoff minimums and our obstacle departures. Very important that you consult this. Now, for this, we'd have to go all the way down to Seattle. I don't want to keep scrolling on that, but that's the book that it's in. If I go back, you can see that you can see all these procedures as well. Instrument approach procedures, the arrivals, and so on. Everything for that airport. Here are some departure procedures. These are SIDS, Spokane 7, out of that airport. And the airport diagram, of course, is there too. So everything for that airport is there. And I put that link again. It's on the website, on the resources page down here, this basic search. I advise you read the IFR Procedures Handbook, Chapter 1. This is this is for the departure procedures that I'm talking about. And I just want to share with you when you're departing, I'm going to keep scrolling down to what I was talking about earlier for this obstacle departure procedure. When they design the departures, they use this gradient. If something within 1 mile, this one here, for example, would be published on that chart that was hard to read. They're not going to give you the clearance above this. You need to see it. That's why you need to have 1 mile visibility. Then they make this from 335 feet above the end of the runway to up to 400 feet at a slope of 200 feet per nautical mile. That means you're going to be 400 feet at 1 nautical mile above the airport. I'm sorry, 200 feet per nautical mile right here. If anything penetrates this one here, you get a little bit of a fudge factor here with this is basically 152 feet per nautical mile. This is 200 feet per nautical mile. You have to maintain the 200. It gives you this fudge factor. So the terrain here, 400 feet, it gives you the clearance. If anything busts that floor of this blue line, you will have an obstacle departure procedure. And you need to take a look at those. For example, I think I've got let's see, presentation files. I pulled up some airports just as some example on that. There's some great examples. I happen to know that, let's go back to the iPad, and I'll show you one that I know of, like out of Little Rock, even flying a jet. I talk to my co-pilots. I say, we're cleared after takeoff, fly this heading, and for vectors on course. Let's say that's your clearance. And so let's just go to airports, and I'm going to look for Little Rock, and I'm going to go to this airport, and I'm going to look at the procedures for the airport and the Jeppesen 1098. So here, I use Jeppesen because I can get to it faster. It says we're departing 22 right. It says climb heading 227 to 1100 feet before turning right. Well, if they cleared me to turn right heading 270 after takeoff, normally it'd be 400 feet. I can turn at 400 feet, but because of this, if I'm in the clouds, I definitely cannot turn before 1100 feet. Why? Go look at Little Rock. There's some downtown buildings there you're going to be pointing toward. So very important that you're aware of this obstacle departure procedure. Even if they just say fly this heading after takeoff, this is telling you, well, when can I turn? Normally 400, unless a departure procedure like this indicates otherwise. If you make that turn early, you could get yelled at. If you're lucky, you'll just get yelled at. If you're not lucky, you might encounter an obstacle. Very important if you're going to take off in low visibility conditions, obviously. If it's clear in 1,000,000 miles, well, you can do a visual climb. And that's I know a lot of people ask for a VFR climb because they can't quite make all the minimums required for when you're in the clouds. And if it's clear in 1,000,000 miles, I highly recommend that. If you're comfortable with it, just say request climb in visual conditions. And that is a clearance that ATC can give you. And they can say, then it kind of puts the obstruction clearance on you. Just another way to clear obstacles while you're doing that.
And Brian, oftentimes ATC will ask, can you maintain visual separation?
They'll ask you that if you can maintain visual. Yeah, so you don't have to. I mean, you can say negative, but if you can maintain VFR conditions or visual conditions, then
for example, out of Pre-4 where I fly out of with Lambert right next door, it's a lot easier for ATC just to say, don't hit nothing.
and if the visibility is good, then you can do that. So that's a call to climb in visual conditions. And if we were to look at the AIM, that in the pilot controller glossary, that's what you would see. Isn't that great? Let me get.
One thing, because we do have a lot of VFR pilots here, I would strongly recommend the VFR pilots look at the ODPs, even if you never intend to get an IFR rating. For example, at Omaha, well, here, Creve Coeur.
Okay, I'm at Creve Coeur. Yeah.
Take a look, if you go to the procedure and look at the takeoff minimums, taking off on 1.6, well, there's a very specific climb rate, or excuse me, I'm at 3.4, I apologize. If you're departing on 3.4, there's a very specific procedure. And if you didn't think about the airport that much, okay, if you're a transient, no big deal, right?
Yeah.
In visual conditions. Well, there's a big bridge that defines why this for the IFR pilot, why this exists. So it's something to look at and say, okay, fine. Omaha, another example.
Is that the bridge you're talking about?
Yep. Yeah. You and I are both from the area, so you know the drill.
Yeah. So there's 3.4, and there's a bridge out there to the left. That's why you have to go to 1100 before making any turns, and you can see it out there over here. This is also showing it's plotting these obstacles.
Yeah. Similarly, in Omaha, everybody thinks Omaha's nice and flat. Well, you got Council Bluffs on one side that you can whack, across the Missouri River, and you have the 72nd Street Towers.
Yeah, so here's Omaha, taking off on 1.4 left with 300-foot ceiling and 2.5 miles, or standard, which is 1 mile, with a minimum climb gradient of 275 per nautical mile to 1,400 feet. That's the climb gradient you need to make, but then departing 3.2 left, 3.2 right, there's a heading to 2,400 feet before turning left. And that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, because of the 72nd Street antennas.
Yeah. So that's something to be familiar with when you take off IFR. No one tells you this. They might say, clear for takeoff, 3.2 left, fly heading 280. You can't just turn at 400 feet. And so if you're an IFR pilot flying this in the clouds, I strongly recommend, in fact, you have to be familiar with these departure procedures. Of course, there are SIDS and stars on top of that. But if you plan to fly that, if the weather is pretty low and you plan to fly that procedure, then I would put that in the remarks section. Hey, I plan to fly the departure procedure out of there, or the obstacle departure procedure, or if you can do a SID, then file a SID by its name. Any other comments? We're at 90 minutes. I'd like to go to questions or Q&A at this point.
People have been desperately asking, what is your resource page?
What is my resource page? Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Forgive me, I've moved all my buttons around. So
yeah, I posted the link a couple of times in the chat and the Q&A. So
yeah, so the resource page is, if you go to our website, which is this ForeFlight Workshops. Let me go back to it. Just ForeFlightWorkshops.com. It's going to take you here. And this is obviously not right. I will edit that. But there's a link right here. If I refresh this page, you're going to see it spinning. Refresh it again. It's spinning. It's right here. And I'm going to leave it there. Workshop 10 resource links. If you tap on that, it's going to take you to the resource page. You can also hyperlink this or type it in. The URL is captainshift.com/IFR resources. It'll be in the email, the follow-up email you get for this webinar. And I have all these documents here. I have the IFR flight planning checklist that I put in there. It's everything you want to consider before flying IFR. Again, hour and a half, we can't cover everything. I did put a copy of this climb gradient chart in there. If you click on it, you'll see it right there. And there's a lot of good stuff in here. There's even the terps that all of this is defined on. If you want to really dig into the weeds, you can get that. There's an article by Flight Insight, Visual Climb Over Airport. Some of these are actually videos. This is a YouTube video.
When you depart IFR,
And this is a Flight Insight's YouTube page, and I think he made a pretty good video about visual climb over airport departure procedures. And so there's a bunch of resources. There's an article in IFR Magazine. There's an article about the diverse vector areas, obstacle departure procedures by Seth Lake. He's another YouTuber I like. He's got some great stuff. And here's a video that he's got getting into a little bit more detail on what we're talking about here. I didn't want to jump into the weeds and tell you how everything's defined, but I really want you to know that it's there, that it exists, these departure procedures to avoid obstacles when you take off. I hope I've shown you a couple of cool tricks in ForeFlight. We'll do a lot more. Definitely keep an eye on our workshops page for this Q&A right here. We're going to update this very shortly. We'll have we got a lot of your great questions, comments, even some suggestions that a lot of you have great tips of things that I've learned. We're going to put a whole list of videos on this Q&A page right here on the ForeFlight Workshops homepage. Anything else? I will say, I'm going to point out one more thing. I pointed to a couple things that if you look at the top of the menu, I have my shifts notes linked here, and I have a lot of kind of cool things here that I've just made up for my students, and I just post them on here. Caveat: make sure they're accurate, and I can be wrong. Correct me if they are. But I have down here IFR loss of two-way radio communications. I have one on IFR VOR equipment check, and so that's basically how to do that. Who uses a VOR anymore? A bunch of neat stuff, but also for the instrument rating. If you're working on your instrument rating, I can't read the FAR, so I have to create something like this. This is what you need, hours-wise experience, to get your instrument rating. 50 hours PIC cross-country. You need 40 hours instrument time. Of that 50 hours PIC cross-country, 10 must be in airplanes, and they're dedicated specifically for the instrument rating. The 40 hours of instrument time, 15 hours has to be with a double I, 3 hours preparation for the check ride, and you have to have a 250 nautical mile cross country with certain specifications that are all listed right here. Again, this is just easy for me. These are the shifts notes that I have on my website. Feel free to look at those as well. Any other questions? Let's do some giveaways. If I go back to here and I click giveaways. So 1 year, did you get some names by chance, Mike? We need 9 names. We're going to have 9 winners tonight.
Yes, they are on the list right now.
All right. Do you want to announce who won the first one? I can't look at it. Who won the finer points? It's 1 year access to the Ground School app, which is a really cool app. Jason Miller has if you haven't seen him, he's got a great way of teaching. Really comfortable, laid back. But what he does is he shows you videos. This subscription will give you private and instrument written prep, oral prep, and video flight training where he shows you videos of what he's actually done. It's really cool. So you can see it in flight. I think it's great. This is all within the app. So who won that?
Yeah, I just watched one today on compass turns, and it was really well done. And in fact, Jason will be speaking at the AOPA Buckeye Airfair next week.
Yeah.
As will I and Jolie Lucas as well. We'll be there next week.
Well, I'm going to miss you guys. I wish I could make that.
Yeah, I wish you could make it too.
I'll be at the in the hangar. They're filming some videos that same weekend, and we'll be doing that.
So Michael Arlen is going to be the winner of the finer points.
Awesome! Congratulations, Michael. We'll reach out to you on the email that you registered for this for. Gold Seal again has donated 2 more apps to the Ground School. And from a teaching standpoint, I just think their videos are great. If a photo is worth 1,000 words, a video is worth 10,000 words. Well, they have some outstanding video and graphics. And I failed to show you one of them because I couldn't find it in time. But it was in the warm-up video to this presentation. And this was a great video that they made on, if I can find it after we stop the recording, I'll show it to you, those of you who stay here. So who won these?
Lifetime Gold Seal Ground School. The first one goes to Michael Baldwin.
All right, Michael, congratulations.
And the second one to Raymond Pry.
All right, congratulations, Michael and Raymond. We'll email you on the email address you registered with, and you can choose private or instrument. And even if you're already instrument rated or private pilot, I recommend these just for, refresher training. And this is a lifetime subscription, which would cost $300. 1 year membership to NAFI, which entitles you to, a lot of our educational content that you couldn't otherwise get if you're a CFI. Great. If you're not a CFI, you're still going to get a ton of content. Who won our 1 year membership to NAFI?
That is going to go to Rebecca Bornstein.
All right. Congratulations, Rebecca. And you will hear from us on that. If you're already a NAFI member, you'll get 1 more year tacked onto that. If you're not a NAFI member, I really encourage you to join. If nothing else, then for that discount that I think I'll show you my invoice right here. I have the Performance Plus plan. I have Jeppesen. Here's my NAFI discount. It costs $39 to join with our code. S49 is the discount code. It's on the website. But so for $49, I saved $153. But tons more reasons to join NAFI. Plus, you can come see us in Oshkosh. Anyway, what else we got? An Ultimate Pilot Logbook. I actually have one here. This thing is awesome. See if I can go full screen here, and I'll show you. This is designed and made really cool. The columns in it are wonderful for the ones that you always have to write in. This one solves that problem. The back has a number of pages for endorsements, all the endorsements you need. As a flight instructor, I love when students have something like this, or obviously a digital online. But I really like that logbook. It's the one that I've switched to now at ultimatepilotlogbook.com. So who won that?
The pilot logbook goes to Adam Fultzer.
All right, Adam, congratulations.
And I got to say, that logbook was designed by, guess what? A NAFI member.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep. Andrew Dow, who will not be named, started that company. And so thank you for that. And he's donated those. And also there's a discount code that anybody can use. The code, I think it's student, when you buy it, and you can get $6 off. Let's see. Let's go back to here. And now we're going to give away, this is an ASA backpack. I have, I almost I actually want to get my own. I have it here. We're going to send it to the winner of this. It's really cool. It's padded real nicely. It's got a pocket for everything you'd actually want. ASA was kind of...
You're just going to jam that into the microphone and have it come out on their computer at home?
I could do that. Yeah, we could try
works?
that. Just stick it into the camera maybe.
Yeah.
That's it. If you can't really see it that well, but because I don't want to unwrap it. It's new and it's clean, and it's going to go to who?
That's going to go to George Turner.
All right. Congratulations, George. We will reach out to you. If I can get my screen right. And we will get your address and we'll send you the backpack. Thank you to ASA for that. Flying Eyes. Boy, I tell you, these are wonderful glasses. You've probably seen their Facebook commercials. We had one shown earlier. You can bend these things. The best thing about these is they don't hurt you on your temples when you put headset on. So when you put a headset over them, they're so thin that it doesn't hurt your temples. They're flexible. The lenses are not polarized so that you can, it doesn't blind you on the iPad. Definitely do not use polarized sunglasses with the iPad. Real easy to stow, super lightweight, and these are the only ones that I haven't broken yet. And you can get 10% off with that code. Who won our Flying Eyes glasses?
They lay under the headset and don't break the seals, so the ANR continues to work with them.
Exactly. That's true.
And you can get them with for those of us with older eyes now, you can get them with the reading glasses built in, and you can even get prescriptions on the upper part as well. That's the next order I need to make, is to get the prescription ones.
Right, and that I have those. They're great. Where you can see at the bottom. It took a little while to learn how to move my head up and down and find the focus, but generally looking down at things, you want to see the cheaters. And looking straight out ahead, you want to see far away. And those they do come like that. So the winner will get to choose their style. This is their most popular one, the Flying Eyes Kestrel Aviators. They kind of look like Ray-Bans, but they're really nice glasses. That's the most popular. So who's going to get the sunglasses?
Cool. Sunglasses are going to go to Alexander Schuster.
All right. Congratulations, Alexander. You will get that. We'll reach out to you. So what I get a lot of the times, people ask me, what do you use for your iPad case and your mount? Many airlines use this. The government uses it. I love mine. I have it right here. I don't have my iPad in it because I'm presenting right now, but if I go, let's see, back to here, this is it.
That's a lame excuse, Brian.
I know. I'm full of them. I got nothing if not excuses. Great suction cup, and you can crank this lever down to tighten it. I've never had it fall off. But if you want to pull it off the suction cup, you just grab here, pinch, and pull it up. Go back on. Can't do it looking in the camera. It just snaps on. Pinch and pull it off, and you're looking at it. As like Jason Miller says, look at it like this while you're looking out the window. Hold it in front of your instruments so that you can take it off. I also will put it on. They have a leg strap that you can get if you prefer that. The square is on the leg strap that goes around your leg, and you just snap it on and strap it around your leg. And then again, when you want to grab it off your leg, you just pinch, pull it off.
And I've got, in my Bonanza, I've got the T-bar because it has
Yeah.
the throwover yoke, and I just have it clamped in between the two yokes. It's perfect.
I used to take it and swap it with a different one because I like to watch movies in hotels or do some work or whatever. But they have this other case that you can get, so you can snap it onto the case. If I can find a way to do this. I need to do it without looking at it in front of my camera, but if I show you this, if I can get it, slide this
You have to
on.
be smarter than the machine.
It's not easy. I fly jets. Oh no.
You had it backwards.
Yeah. You slide it on, snap it, and then you've also got the cover.
I think you better keep your day job, Brian.
I better. But you can also, when you open it, you can set it. It's got these little grooves, so you can set it at an angle like that. Anyway, that's the other attachment. Enough on that. I'm bragging about it. You can get a discount. We're going to give one away to who?
I lost my place here. That was the pivot mount, iPad case and mount,
Yeah.
Flyboy's pivot case. That is going to go to Julie Schrey.
Hey, congratulations, Julie. I think you'll love this, and we will reach out to you, and you can choose. We'll get one that fits your iPad. So they will help you fit the right one. I don't know about you, but I've bought a lot of things on eBay, like iPad cases and iPhone cases. Not eBay, but what's that? What the big company starts with an A, ends in an Amazon. Anyway, I bought one there, and half the time I got to send them back because I bought the wrong size or they listed the wrong size. It's a pain, but Pivot will work with you on that.
Great.
My favorite author and yours has a new book called An Illustrated Guide to Flying. Dad wrote this to kind of replace his original one, which was forgive the reach, this one, which you may have had from years of past. I think this came out the year I was born, so like 25 years ago. Anyway, he's updated it, wrote this one. He's going to sign it to whoever wins this and get a copy of it. It's a great book for people wanting to maybe learn to fly. I think it's a good textbook for like a high school curriculum. Anyway, who's going to get that book?
This name might be familiar to you. Your friend and mine, Jolie Lucas, is the winner.
All right, Jolie, congratulations. Very cool. We will get you an autographed copy of that. Although you could probably just go by
at the Grammys last night.
Yeah, that's cool. And we didn't win an award?
No, we didn't.
Next
we got
year.
Snubbed again.
Dang it. Next year for sure.
Next year.
All right, so that's our winners. Thank you for that. That gets to any other Q&A or tips and tricks you got. We'll stick around after this, after I end the recording, and we'll just shoot the breeze with you. We'll talk about things that come up and any other questions you have. But as far as any questions pertaining to IFR planning before we get offline.
We did have a couple people ask for go backs on some things, and we can do that in the after party.
All right, we'll go back and look at anything they want.
And let me see. I think that we've answered everything else.
Okay.
Between Bob and James, they were firing away on the Q&A tonight.
You guys are awesome. I don't know how you can do all that. Keep up with those, but that's great. I appreciate that. Well, again, everything is on the ForeFlight Workshops webpage. Before we get off here, I'll go find the slide to put the QR code for the resources for tonight's on there again, but there's a link to everything on ForeFlightWorkshops.com. Again, we're going to have a new format coming up where I think it's going to be a URL to, well, I won't give it away yet. We're just going to go to one website at the right time, and you're going to just be watching our program, and you can pause it, you can stop it. It'll be streamed with a lot better quality. Get away from Zoom, and then I'll quit begging you guys for donating money if we can do it that way. So in any event, stand by for a notice on that. Email us if you want to be a part of it. Scan the QR code on the screen or click on the link in the description below and take this short quiz for Wings Credit. Again, thank you for joining us tonight. We really appreciate you coming. We'll see you next month on March 4th, the first Monday at 7 p.m. Central Time. The most important wings on an airplane are on the pilot. Have a good night.